Good morning. My name is Allison Arnold. I'm the extension agent here in Buncombe County, and I'll be your host today. We will make time throughout the program for questions and are recording this program. We'll be making it available on our website, buncombeMasterGardener.org, which you should visit because we do have an excellent video library there. We look forward to our program and all your questions. So welcome to Gardening in the Mountains, Growing Vegetables on Garden Structures. Our speaker today is Mary Alice Ramsey, Extension Master Gardener Volunteer here in Buncombe County. Mary Alice Ramsey is a native of Western North Carolina and has been an Extension Master Gardener Volunteer for 10 years. She is a mom, a grandma, who lives near here in Fairview. She's a retired teacher, a passionate lifelong gardener, an artist, and a writer. That's all probably why she looks for new ways to garden, ways to find fun and beauty with creative, productive garden structures. In 2017, her vegetable garden was featured in Southern Living magazine, and now we're going to see and hear more about it right here today. Thank you, Mary Alice.
Thank you, Allison. Hey there. I am Mary Alice, and I love vegetable gardening. And one of the reasons I love vegetable gardening is because I'm drawn to growing vegetables on garden structures. I'm just happy to be here with you today. The first slide that you're looking at, there, the title slide, you see a distant view of my garden. It takes up about a third of my backyard, and I love being out there. And by the way, almost all of the slides you'll see today are of my garden. Before we move to the next slide, you'll see in this first one that there's a fence in the front. It does not surround, but there's a fence in the front. There's a trellis archway that you're seeing from a distance. There are raised beds, and I'll talk to you more about those. In the left-hand side of this slide, lower left, you're seeing what are considered horizontal stakes. This is a bean row where the support is held up by vertical stakes with a horizontal at the top and bottom and strings on that if you look closely. And there are those blue window frames that I'm going to talk to you about also. In the far distance on the center of the slide you're looking at right now, there's a structure that looks like a house structure, and I have beans growing on it. And I'm going to tell you more about that also. So let's continue. Establishing garden structures is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to use that 1, 2, 3 count twice because one time it has to do with the establishment of those structures. Secondly, we'll be talking about 3 types of structures. These images that you're looking at right now are the step ladder, which lives in my garden during the summer. I take it in during the winter, store it in a shed. Cucumbers growing up a step ladder right there. On the right, once again, you're seeing the blue windows, and you can see some horizontal stakes. You'll see some hoops across blueberries in the background, and just a few other things growing. At the bottom, there is a trellis entryway, and then you see some tomatoes on a stake there. By the way, in between each instructional slide, I'm showing you a different view of something going on in the garden. So let's, again, keep that 1, 2, 3 in mind. Here, you're seeing squash blossoms. If you look very closely, you will see that there is a grayish-black metal structure there. I'm using a little temporary garden fence section to hold up my squash plant. Okay, now, number 1 in establishing garden structures, we need to prepare the soil. Now, most any gardener is aware that you do need well-drained and rich soil. I say rich soil, it's rich in nutrients. What you're looking at right there is a compost pile. In order to grow vegetables on structures or otherwise, you need ample sunlight and water. So it's important to position your garden where there's at least 6 hours of sun a day. 8 to 10 is even better, but at least 6. And it should be near a water source. So think about preparation of soil. Right now, you're looking at my compost bin, and you'll notice there are 3 different sections. This structure was built, 5 or 6 years ago. Up until that point, my compost was a pile. It was a pile of weeds that I had pulled up. I was careful not to put weeds that had gone to seed in this pile. Also, you can certainly use vegetable scraps that would go in a compost pile, but a lot of mine is the greenery, also mulched leaves from the garden. Notice that with those 3 sections, I throw all of the current compost into one. I turn it just a couple of times a year, but at the end of the season, it's turned into the second compost section where it's really beginning to rot down and decompose. And by the next year, when it's turned into the third section, I have rich, wonderful, dark soil with lots of nutrients and just really well composted soil. While we're looking at this, let me mention that I'm a pretty casual composter. I do follow some basic healthy guidelines about it, but I do just turn it a couple of times a year. Number 2, you're going to prepare the structure. Not only prepare the soil, but prepare the structure. What you're looking at right now is a tomato cage, and my cage is fastened with wire to a stake. So you're looking at ripening tomatoes right there. But as you prepare the structure, definitely consider your plant size. How big is this going to get? How far will it spread out? How tall might it grow? How much space will it take? Consider the plant growth and be sure that your structure will be sturdy enough to support the plant. Here you're seeing a bumblebee on some sage. And right now I want to mention how important pollinators are for the garden. Pollinators meaning the flowers that are blooming there. Probably a third of my vegetable garden is a flower garden. And you don't really have to do that much, but having flowers either in the garden or close by the garden will certainly help ensure that you have lots of healthy vegetables. On the right, we're looking at the tomatoes in a little bit different stage. They're progressing toward ripeness here. Number 3, it's important that your structures support the plants. After you've prepared the soil and you've prepared the structure, you're going to plant at the base of this support so that you can watch it grow. Now, some vegetables will just have tendrils that cling to a string and they will just take care of themselves as they go up. Many others need some help. You tie those to the structure and guide it as it goes along. Those need to be pruned sometimes, as is the vine. If it just gets too long, that can be pruned back. And with vegetables, there are little additional plants that will grow in the crevices of the branches to the side that sometimes will create a healthier plant if you remove those. It's also important to harvest your vegetables regularly. My experience with when cucumbers are on the ground, occasionally they hide under the leaves and you don't see them. Then they get huge, not only taking a lot of energy from the plant, but they're not as tasty when they're harvested. When they grow up a support, depending on the type of cucumber it is, the ones that do need a support, you can just have a much nicer, neater, cleaner, more abundant harvest. Speaking of tying, let me mention that if you'll look at this picture closely, you will see that these little cucumber tendrils are clinging to a string. So on the ladder, which really supports the weight of the cucumbers and the plant, I also added gardener's twine onto that. Depending on the vegetable, like the tomatoes, I sometimes use gardener's Velcro ties where I just cut off a little length, whatever is needed, and fasten that. Occasionally, I use twisters. There are those that are available for the garden also. And you can use whatever kind of string or light torn piece of fabric that you have available. Here you're looking at chrysanthemums. These grow later in the summer. They grow all year, but they bloom later in the summer. And I usually do prop them up with little portable fence pieces. So stakes. We have talked about the 1, 2, 3 as far as establishing the structures. And now we're going to talk about 3 types of structures. The first one is stakes. We are familiar probably with staking tomatoes. You will, in this slide, notice that there is a metal stake to the left, but there's also a cage that surrounds. And you certainly don't have to do it in this method. I do to stabilize the cage, but the stakes support the plants to prevent them bending or breaking. And when I first started using garden supports, I really was thinking of saving space. Okay, that was it, saving space. I did not think about at the time that one of the great advantages to garden structures is that they prevent disease. They also prevent insect infestation. Like the statement says, also it maximizes your space. So many advantages to staking. The slide you're looking at right now is in addition to my garden that I have had only a couple of years. Notice that there's a little patio that's done with landscaping stones and some repurposed chairs and a little old patio table out there. That gives me a place to take a break when I have that opportunity. Notice behind that, you'll see beans growing. If you look closely, there is a horizontal pipe that actually is affixed. You don't see the stakes, but there are stakes at the ends, the horizontal pipe at the top and bottom in between, and there are strings that go up and down between those horizontal parts of the structure. So the beans grow up those. You'll also notice that in the center is a wrought iron piece that's hung onto that, and that's just for fun. You're looking at horizontal stakes. Cages, that second type of structure as far as vertical growing. Now, what you're looking at once again is the ladder, and you might ask yourself, is this a cage? Is it a stake? It's in between. But cages allow air circulation, which helps to prevent disease. It makes harvesting easier, but it also makes straighter, cleaner vegetables. What you're seeing right here is a little hint at the wildlife that I find in the garden. The slide on the left is not the same turtle you're seeing on the right. This was the smallest turtle I've seen in my garden, and the research I did on it told me that this little guy is probably about a year old. On the right, you're seeing one that's a few years older, and I do occasionally put food out there that they enjoy. Trellises. A trellis is a multi-structure in the garden, generally that you can walk through or walk into. The one you're looking at on the left is called a moon gate. My husband built this, and notice that it's affixed to the fence that's in front of the garden. What you're seeing there is not vegetables on it, but roses. I will show you how I use that fence for vegetables. They could also be grown onto the trellis that's the entryway. Trellises help maximize space. They help you grow more vegetables, and they're also interesting. They're fun to look at, they're useful, and they help keep your garden neat. I love this trellis. We call it our bean house. And I want to give you a little background of that. I was with Terry several years ago, maybe a dozen years ago, at a community garden, and there was a teepee built from cane poles, and beans were growing up those poles. Now, you might have seen those before. As a matter of fact, I have one in my garden that I just put in the ground yesterday. When we saw that teepee with the cane poles, it was so big that children could go inside it. And when the beans were growing, it just made a wonderful, cozy little house. Beans were hanging down inside, and it was such an inviting structure. So we thought, okay, maybe we could actually build a bean house that you could walk into. You'll notice with the one in the slide, there it's made from 2x2s. It is affixed together on the bottom, on the top, in the eave, and it's sturdy in between. There are posts in between. But what might not be apparent is it fits just inside a raised bed, which is another garden structure. So it has screws that hold it into that bed. Now, the cool thing about that also is we can move it. So what we do is in order to rotate the crops, we leave it in the same bed for about 3 years. Then we move it to another bed so we can rotate that crop around. What you're looking at right there are beans growing at the base that are just barely starting to grow, extend their tendrils out, and grow up their strings. So the bean house is just a fun, exciting addition to our garden. I mentioned raised beds there just a moment ago, and we are going to talk about other possibilities, but I'd like to check in with Allison. Are there any questions yet?
Yeah, we've got a couple. Let's see. What's the best way to stake or support larger vegetables like winter squash?
The obvious answer is a sturdy stake. Let's think about the word stake. Stakes were originally stakes. They were twigs, they were limbs that were actually a stake in the ground. We have access to metal stakes and to heavier wooden or a fortified plastic and metal stake. So I would start out with something of that type and probably have multiple stakes, possibly a horizontal brace on those stakes with melons, like a cantaloupe or watermelon or a pumpkin, or even some heavier vegetables. Sometimes we use slings affixed to those multiple stakes or cages. That might be a good solution.
In your bean house, you string a lot of strings.
I do.
How long does that take?
The bean house takes less than an hour. I do probably spend an hour or a little more in the garden when I do the bean house and the other beans that are on the horizontal stakes. I have two of those. I do it with jute, gardener's twine. I do it early in the morning or late in the afternoon, generally early in the morning. And it's actually fun. So it takes a little while.
So, do you plant a seed at the bottom or do you put in transplants for your beans at the bottom of each string?
For beans, I plant seeds at the bottom. What I do also is I prepare the soil ahead of time. I use a hoe and drag a row out through there. But this is me. Instead of planting a single row of beans, I plant a double row where I plant one to the left, one to the right, one to the left, one to the right. So it alternates down the row. So it's almost like I'm planting a double row of beans, but they're not too close together. And then they just fill up the vines.
Keep animals from getting in your trellis areas.
I am actually going to show you a couple of slides, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in our presentation.
What kind of wood are you using in your raised beds?
These are landscape timbers. They could be bought from any local supplier of landscape timbers. Before we established them, we did some research because there was talk years back about there being toxins in the wood, that kind of thing. So we verified, and right now the things manufactured are safe for vegetables. Because we've had our raised beds for so long, we have had sections of them, especially the ones either against the ground or on the top that are exposed to a lot of weather that have started decaying. So we occasionally replace sections of them. The slide that you're looking at now is the exciting part of my presentation. Not that other stuff wasn't exciting, but I want to talk about other possibilities because in addition to stakes, cages, trellises, there are other possibilities. What you're looking at right now are raised beds. One on the left is from the Learning Garden at the Extension office. And what you're seeing in the front there is a wattle type of weaving where posts are driven into the ground and willow or other long bendable twigs are woven into that. This one happens to be divided into sections also, but that is a type of raised bed. If you look at that same slide or that same image in the background, you'll see a raised bed that is just boards upright on their sides. There are many manufactured raised beds, but you'll see on the left side of the left slide a bed that's created from rocks. Historically, raised beds are made from whatever the gardener has available. There is a great advantage in being able to loosen the soil, enrich the soil. Soil in raised beds is generally well drained. Let me mention also, if you're interested in raised beds, but you're just starting out as a gardener, your first beds can just be mounds of earth. That's how I started out with my garden. I didn't actually have the structure to raise the bed, but I mounded up the soil, added nutrients to the soil, and that works great too. I would also encourage you, if you're a beginning gardener, to start out small. You're not going to do this all at one time, but it is very rewarding and it's fun. The slide you're looking at right now is marigolds. I always have marigolds in my garden. They can repel some insects, but I have them there for color and they just invite me into the garden, as many of these things do. Now, as far as other possibilities with the planted structure in the garden, you're looking at a chest of drawers. For the past dozen years, I've had a chest of drawers in my garden. And because I just like the color blue, I painted it blue. This is certainly not a retail chest of drawers. It's a yard sale chest of drawers. I had one for a number of years, and it is left out all summer in the weather. In the winter, I usually move it into a shed or into a sheltered area, and then I plant it differently different years. What you're looking at right there are coleus. There's decorative sweet potato vines coming down the sides. There's moonflower vines that are growing up the sides and just ferns around it. I have placed this actually at an area of my garden that doesn't get quite as much sun as the rest, but just to plant a piece of furniture is fun. And you can have plants grow up the sides or grow down the sides. So think furniture. I just love sharing the color of poppies. Those are in my garden. And this is a secret, but I'll share it with you. I am a butterfly whisperer, as in, I love butterflies. I invite them. I create a space for them. I stand very still, and sometimes they come to me. Think about more than one use for a birdhouse. The picture that you're looking at on the left was taken about this time of year, probably last year, because most things have not actually grown up their posts yet. The bluebird that you're seeing sitting on that horizontal post is just shopping for a birdhouse. We do have 2 bluebird houses in the garden. And so there's obviously a birdhouse suited for a bird. But later in the season, as the beans grow up that post, there's a structure that helps hold up the beans as well. Oh, and look, I've photographed inside the bluebird house, and we have bluebird eggs, and we have babies, and so many seasons, so many years, sometimes twice in a summer, they raise families and they fly away. Peas, pots, and tomatoes on a baker's rack. You'll notice that there is a baker's rack in the center there. I have pots on the top, but notice that it's serving a double purpose. On the left, you'll see that there are peas growing up that baker's rack. These are an early spring or a fall crop. I have harvested quite a few peas from that baker's rack. You'll notice also in the slide on the left, if you look closely where the peas are growing up, down at the bottom, tomato leaves. Here's a close-up on the right of tomatoes growing up that baker's rack. So that's fun too. It works great. A little bit more wildlife in the garden. You have to look close for that little frog you see there. And there's a salamander on the right, and I love zinnias. I always have zinnias in the garden. Now, we have traditional and non-traditional containers. A container can be a structure in the garden. The one on the left is planted. The one on the right, look closely, that's a doll's bed. Now, that was one of those yard sale finds. I saw that and thought, I can plant that bed. And what we have, whimsically, is a bed of lettuce. Sometimes it's a lettuce bed. Sometimes it's an herb bed. But it's in a raised bed, and it is a garden structure. And as you can see, I've got quite a good harvest coming up there. Speaking of harvests, here's a little bit more that was harvested from raised beds and from posts and stakes and strings. Let me say, while we're looking at these vegetables, I garden for a few reasons. One of them is because I love fresh vegetables. I like providing those for myself and for my family. Another reason is because it's fun. Even though, okay, let's get real, it's work. I spend hours pulling weeds, preparing, pulling weeds again, providing the structures, pulling a few weeds again, watching the plants grow, sometimes replanting when the plants get eaten by the rabbits and that kind of thing. It's out there. Normally, by the way, I tend to be in the garden between about 8 and 10 in the morning, or maybe after 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm generally not out there in the heat of the day, but I want the vegetables. It's fun. And the garden revitalizes me. Now, that might sound a little strange because it can make you tired, but it can also revitalize you. I love having the garden pretty because it invites me out there. Here, we're seeing sunflowers staked to an existing fence. There's a little close up of a sunflower that's just about ready to open. On the right, notice that there is the wooden fence that runs in the front of my garden. By the way, that wooden fence, if you'll look at the blue post that's affixed to the fence post, sturdies the fence. If you look closely, there is a green twisty wire that is holding that sunflower to the fence. That can also be done with tomatoes. And I don't think I have a photo of tomatoes climbing the fence, but I do that also. So whatever you've got available, it's like, hey, that could work. And there are roses. The roses also are braced against the fence. Back to the vegetables, what you're looking at on the left is a hoop, which is a cage. And over that, I have bird netting. I have a double layer of bird netting that's offset a little bit to make the little squares, the enclosures, smaller. I use this to keep little moths off of the cabbages so I don't get the cabbage worms eating up the cabbage, or at least for the most part. Sometimes there's something else munching on the cabbage, like snails or something, but the cabbage can outgrow the damage. On the right, you'll see there's a cabbage that's really pretty and coming along. So I use hoops over cabbage as well as over blueberries. That's a great structure to use in the garden. And here's a little close up of the blueberries that are coming along. You can see they are under a netting, which is stretched over hoops. Those are made from PVC pipe and affixed to the inside of the raised bed. On the right, you're seeing the blueberries. They are so big and delicious, and I love them. The birds love them too. The netting can keep most of the birds away, but I do uncover them eventually. And so I have to share with the birds. Now, this is to address the question that was asked earlier about how do you keep the varmints from eating up the small vegetables that are coming along. Depending on the season, the wildlife in the garden really varies from year to year. One year, I couldn't believe how many rabbits there were out there eating things down. Sometimes I have turkeys that parade through on a regular basis, and I can't seem to divert them somewhere else. So I have to try to protect the plants, certainly until they get established. On occasion, we have a groundhog. There are birds that will eat seeds or little seedlings sometimes. These are some of the solutions that I use. On the left, you'll see the temporary little fence pieces. You can purchase these. You don't have to let them be temporary, but I use them temporarily. You can purchase these in a garden supply store. I would encourage you to look around at yard sales and flea markets because that's where these came from. But the mound that you see inside the raised bed on the left is where squash will grow. Okay, that's a hill. Squash has been planted, but this was a year where the tiny plants had started to come up. One day they were there, the next day they were gone. Turkeys had actually come by and eaten up my plants. So what I've tried as a solution is a temporary structure warding those off. Now, I realize that if an animal tried hard enough, it can get through that. But that barrier and the visual does work as a deterrent. In the center slide, you're seeing how those are just lined up down the row. And the scarecrow that you're looking at right there really does scare the crows away. We take our scarecrows in during the winter. Every spring, they get a new outfit, or at least they get a new shirt. The overalls last for years and years. Anyway, they do keep the crows out. I have never seen a crow in the garden, and crows will eat little plants with scarecrows out there. On the right is another something I came up with, maybe because I didn't have enough of the other fence pieces, but I've just put little wooden fence structures. There's a net over the top, so the net will stay on better and won't dip down in the middle. I have taken little cane poles that I already had and wove it through the net. So do the best way I can, get a little creative there. In the background, you're seeing a garden shed. So that could work. Okay, I do have tall phlox in my garden. That's the pinkish purple flower you're looking at. They're wonderful pollinators, but the garden angel is actually just beside my garden, and it is working as a stake to prop up those lilies. You saw a scarecrow there a moment ago in an early season, like a springtime garden. What you're looking at on the left is a fall garden because it's later in the year. Many of the crops have been harvested. You're seeing lettuce and cabbage and kale grow. But look at that scarecrow. The scarecrow is a stake. You can grow beans up a scarecrow, and I'm going to do that this year. What you're looking at right there is moonflowers, and they are pollinators for moths in the evening. In the center, you're looking at cucumbers that are growing up and are corralled in. These are bush cucumbers. They're corralled in and are growing onto a wrought iron piece. On the right, there's a bicycle. Now, we had this little rusty bicycle that stood for years in a different part of our yard. When it had morning glories growing up, I decided I was going to move it around, put it in the garden so it has peas growing up it. And that's not only fun, it's practical. It works. Scarecrow, wrought iron, bicycle stakes. And here we see a bit more of that moonflower growing up the scarecrows. Look, the fellow on the right has a boutonniere. The lady on the right is just covered with moonflowers during the daylight. The moonflowers close up, but in the evening they open, and they are pollinator attractors for moths. We haven't finished with the structures in the garden, but I want to at least mention structures as extensions of the garden. Many of you will look at this and say, oh, yeah, I know. It's monarch eggs. That center slide up at the top has a tiny little white dot on the underside of milkweed. If you have milkweed, you can look for those this time of year. I brought some of these into my house about a week ago. You can see that egg is three-dimensional. It is well affixed to the underside of a leaf. On the left of this visual here is a tiny little caterpillar that has just hatched out. That was taken a day or two ago. In the center, you're seeing a bouquet of milkweed inside a butterfly house. On the right, you're seeing a pretty structure. This is something I happened to have already, and it came from a flea market. Several years ago, I realized I had monarch caterpillars in my garden. So I brought them into the house because the research told me that of the eggs that are laid by monarchs on milkweed out in the wild or in a garden, probably 10% of them will survive. There's so many predators. Many of the eggs are eaten up by spiders and ladybugs and other little bugs out there in the garden that will eat insects. Aphids don't hurt them. So just saying that, if you see aphids on plants where butterfly eggs are, the aphids won't hurt them, but the spiders will. Anyway, I bring those inside. I just take care of them, let them sit there. About 7 to 10 days later, the eggs will hatch. You'll see those tiny little caterpillars. Within another 7 to 10 days, they will each make a chrysalis. Another 7 to 10 days later, they become a beautiful jade green chrysalis. When it's almost ready to hatch, it will turn transparent like the one you're looking at on the left. Notice that this is within in that structure. This chrysalis was built on the top glass of that structure. Then we'll see the butterfly just hatching out. The beautiful, wonderful cycle that this presents is that within a day or two, that butterfly has flown out around my yard to the different pollinators and is back in the garden on the blooming butterfly weed. I know that was a little bit of a stretch to call that a garden structure, but I do have that milkweed as part of the garden within a raised bed, and the structure that I use inside is something that will enclose those butterfly eggs to raise those monarchs. Let's also talk about multiple use posts. On the left, tall marigolds, and you can see a green stake, one of those little plastic metal enforced green stakes that are helping them stay upright. I plant those among the tomatoes, so they also lean against the tomato cages and tomato stakes. In the center, I came across this, it's a repurposed window structure, the lattice looking window structure that has peas growing up. Some years I also use that for cucumbers. On the right, you're seeing the trellis. Now this has clematis growing up. It also sometimes has roses growing up and it has tomatoes growing up it, but that's part of a trellis. Only one more slide now of the monarch butterflies. If you've never done this, it is just so sweet and wonderful when you can release those butterflies. That's what you're seeing right there. Window frames. A number of years back, I mentioned that some years we have more critters in the garden than others that will eat up the plants. So on the year that we had many rabbits, my husband and I decided to fence only the part that at that time had the vertical beans growing. Now, since then, we've added the bean house also, but the vertical beans. If you look closely at the upper left slide, you will see that there's a gate or a fence, but you have to look closely at that. It surrounds only a little section of the garden, and it is a rabbit fence. So hopefully they can't get in there. After we had the fence surrounding that area and beans growing up on the left and the right, I commented that, wow, this is just like a room. It's like a garden room. So what we did, very appropriate for a room, is extended another horizontal stake, and this is made from metal pipe on one end, and we hung blue window frames on there. So now you can walk through the gate into the garden when the beans are at their height and they've grown to the tops of the stakes. Then we're enclosed on one side, enclosed on the other side. We have windows on the end, and those windows support different things on different years. The short fence and then up onto the window frames, sometimes there's beans, sunflowers, morning glories. Right now, what you're looking at is dill. I plant dill and fennel there also that props up against those window frames. On the lower left slide, you're looking at a caterpillar for a black swallowtail. In the center, you're seeing the dill. And on the right, yeah, that's my hand. Look at that butterfly. I love it. I love it. So window frames, I love them. Good idea. Oh, and you noticed they're blue. They don't have to be blue, but mine are. We still have a number of slides to go. Allison, are there more questions at this point?
We did have a couple of questions about the sunflowers. How do you stabilize those?
If I plant them near my fence, I use either twine or a twister type material that you can buy in a garden supply store. It comes in a big roll, and I fasten them to the fence. If they're not near the fence or some other established structure that's already there, I use posts or stakes. Sometimes those posts or stakes are manufactured, and sometimes they are stakes. It's interesting because some sunflowers just stand right up. They're fine. They're tall. They're straight. They're strong. And others that are about their same size tend to want to lean over, depending on the weight of the blossom they're holding. So I affix them to stakes.
Do you ever grow beans up your sunflowers or anything like that? Use them for twining?
Do you know, I do. Sometimes it's unintentional, but that can be done. The answer to that is not usually. But let me interject here that having prepared this presentation, I have gotten more innovative even this year with things I'm not showing you. Even though I had not had a cucumber or bean teepee in a while, I have one of those in my garden just since yesterday. A couple of days ago, went through the resources I had available at home and came up with 2 metal grids. I have heard of people doing this real successfully with sections of a dog crate that aren't being used, and the side sections that would be bigger. And I have leaned those against each other, and I'm planting cucumbers on those also. Purchase what you need, use what you've got. I have not let beans grow up, sunflowers, but yeah, it could definitely be done.
One more question about the netting. Somebody said that they put up netting, caught a young bird, so they took it down. But how do you address that with snakes and birds?
Do you know, I have not had that problem with birds, and that certainly could happen. Like a bird gets underneath the edge or that sort of thing. As far as snakes are concerned, I have had the experience twice of a snake getting caught in a lower edge of the netting. What we had to do was, and this is a very tenuous situation, hold the snake, use snips, and cut the netting. So that was not a good deal. Now I use lattice temporary, the ones you saw in one of the slides. I put the lattice wooden fence sections along the bottom edge and where the PVC pipe is that makes the hoops. And then I bring the netting down to the fence section, but not to the ground. And since we're doing that, we have not had any more snakes get caught in the netting. It is possible that a bird could get in there and you'd have to rescue it, but I have not had that experience. But that is a consideration. We've talked about window frames as trellises, and I'm just showing you a fun slide in between. On the left, a fern. Now, who would want ferns in their garden? You have a lot of sun in the garden. My garden used to have 10 or 12 hours of sun, and then the trees grew. Many of these trees are my neighbor's trees. So my garden does not have as many hours of sun. About half of it still has 10 or 12. Some of it has maybe 6 or 8 hours sun. And some at the very back, I use only for growing pollinators like flowers because it really does not get enough sun. So on the north side of my raised beds, I grow ferns unintentionally. I just dig them up and put them in a fern bed. In the center, you're looking at our garden shed. That was built just a few years ago. It is used as a shed. When you walk in there, rakes, hoes, a tiller, depending on the season. Sometimes we have the scarecrows stored in there. We have pots, we have fertilizer, we have bags of soil, all those things that might be stored in a shed. But this is a fun shed. It was made out of all repurposed materials. The tin, the posts, the windows, the wood, everything was all repurposed. We have our scarecrow on the right. Notice the window frames in the background. This was probably taken in late June because you're seeing those tomatoes growing up the posts, up the cages. Not there yet, but they're growing. Now, consider raised plantings. We talked about a raised bed, and that can be done in different ways. The one on the left is close to our garden, but not in the garden, and it is more for fun, but it raises up a bed of succulents there. And you're seeing an old stove and a birdhouse. I have surprisingly actually seen birds go in and out of that birdhouse, but it's more decorative. On the right, you're seeing a wheelbarrow, which can certainly be a raised bed, and that's in an herb bed. Again, we're looking at a bean house, the bean house, but you're actually looking at our old and new bean houses, because the one on the left we used for probably 8 or 10 years. You see the beans growing up the sides, and we added little stained glass pieces to the end. But after being in the ground against the raised beds for a number of years, the posts started to decay. So Terry reinforced them with metal, and that worked for a couple more years. But last year he said, I think I'm just going to build another bean house. Let me tell you, I could stand up inside the first bean house. Then we had grandchildren who grew so tall they couldn't. So he made another bean house, made it taller for the grandkids, and he did arches instead of a point. So this year will be the first year we use this. Notice also that there is a walkway in the middle of the greenhouse just so we can walk in there and not be in the mud. So there's our old and new bean houses. I've got a couple more slides I'm going to show you, but then we'll check for questions again. I want to express a special thanks not only to the North Carolina Extension Master Gardener Handbook, but also to the Virginia Cooperative Extension, where I gained some information. Look at these little beans growing up the strings on the bean house here. It's always a race to see. This is the sidebar they're growing to there, but they will extend on toward the top, and it's always fun. It's a race to see which bean vine will get to the top first. I especially very seriously want to thank you. I realize that you may not run out to your garden and come up with or employ all the structures I've shown you. You might think of some others that I haven't even thought of. I'm always trying to think creatively about that. I seriously appreciate your joining me, and I hope this information has been helpful and inspiring. I'm inspired.
I think what I'm feeling right now, Mary Alice, is fun. I've done some bean TPs after hearing you do this talk before about looking at ladders, and it just makes it more fun. And then to watch the plants grow and find their way up there. So it's such a lovely program. Just a couple of questions. Do you have a name for your scarecrow?
No, although we call them Grandma and Grandpa.
You better tell Terry to watch out because I think a couple of people are interested in cloning him.
I know I shouldn't have said his name.
We will be sending this video out for continued resources. Have you ever thought about using window screens?
No, I have not thought about using window screens, and I'll bet that could work.
There are a couple of comments about the color, the blue, and how that just really stands out. I have garden envy. I think it's just so beautiful to see your images. You've worked really hard.
Oh, thank you. I do plant blue flowers also, but there are only so many blue flowers. I love the mixture of color too. I did mention, but let me emphasize, pollinators are so important for healthy vegetables, for vegetables at all. Remember, just as a review, you prepare the soil, you prepare the structure, and then plant the plant. Whether you're working with stakes or a combination of stakes and cages and trellises and variations of those things, not only does that allow more space, but it helps prevent diseases, helps with air circulation, helps deter insects instead of the plants laying on the ground. You'll have a bigger harvest. It's easier to harvest. Your vegetables are cleaner. There's so many reasons to use structures in growing vegetables.
Thank you so much. I want to direct people to our video library. We've had a program on square foot gardening, and I think this fits in really well, but you're providing a whole different approach to it. Join us on June 19th. Luke Owen, our commercial horticulture agent, will be doing a program on invasive plant controls. Meanwhile, enjoy your gardens and bring color and creativity into the gardens with Mary Alice's inspiration.